Enton in for Chris Cuomo in New Orleans after the terror attack.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Enton in for Chris Cuomo tonight. We are joining you live again from the scene in New Orleans. We're just a few blocks away from that deadly New Year's Day terrorist attack that killed 14 people and injured 35 others. You can hear we're near a steamship that's about to head out. A little noisy here in New Orleans, but bear with us. We've got major developments in the investigation here and the investigation into that Tesla cyber truck that exploded in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, killing the suspect and wounding 7 others. A lot of new information coming out today. Here in New Orleans, we now know that the suspect, Shamsud Din Jabbar, used a very rare explosive compound in the 2 IEDs that he built. This is something that we are told has never been used in an American terror attack before. How did he know how to use it? Where did he learn that? We're going to get to that in just a few minutes. But first, the breaking news out of Las Vegas. Authorities are now learning more about the suspect, Matthew Levelsberger's motive behind the Tesla Cybertruck bomb. Las Vegas police just released notes that the bomber left behind on his cell phone. Here is what they revealed at a press conference earlier today.
This was not a terrorist attack. It was a wake-up call. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. What better way to get my point across than a stunt with fireworks and explosives? Why did I personally do it now? I need to cleanse my mind of the brothers I've lost and relieve myself of the burden of the lives I took. I'd like to just also expand on that and understand that these are just excerpts. In there, he does offer additional information that is varying on the spectrum in terms of political grievances, issues about the conflicts elsewhere, not here, domestic issues, societal issues, a variety of other things, including personal challenges as well.
Okay, so a lot of new information coming out about this guy today. Joining me again tonight, we have former FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon and also former FBI and CIA counterterror official Phil Mudd. Bobby and Phil, appreciate you both being with me on a Friday night. Bobby, I want to start with you. Levelsberger, these messages coming from the cell phone, he says that this wasn't meant to be an act of terror. What do you make of what came out today?
Well, look, we can only take him on his word. I mean, it's very rare that somebody pulls an event like this and we actually can talk to them. And although we can't really talk to him, we know what he's saying to us. You know, he is one of the 22 veterans that kill themselves a day. We've all heard that terrible statistic. And he wanted to do it not in the quiet way that we lose 22 a day and don't know who they are. He wanted to do it and get his point across. He's clearly got... I saw reporting that he may have had a TBI, a traumatic brain injury. He clearly is suffering from PTS. That's in the words, I know PTS, and that's in the words that he puts out there. The lives he took and the brothers he lost. This is a person who was, intent on going out and taking their own life, as many veterans do, but he wanted to make a point, and he made the point by leaving these messages behind. So he's telling us, and I think we need to take him, on his word.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. There's some new reporting out tonight. His girlfriend has said that he had a traumatic brain injury and that he had the Cybertruck and it made him feel like Batman days before the attack. Sort of strange there. I want to ask you both about what was released on Sean Ryan's podcast today. This is another really sort of interesting component into this and what was going on into his mind and whether you think there's any validity to it. Ryan's guest says he received an email from Levelsberger that contained his actual manifesto. Listen to this.
This right here, this manifesto, if you want to call it that, came in on Tuesday. And when I started reading this, my initial take was, okay, this is off the deep end. It's bonkers. I can't validate or verify any of the stuff in this manifesto. He said, in case I do not make it to my decision point or onto the Mexico border, I am sending this now. What we have been seeing with drones, he puts that in quotes, he says drones, is the operational use of gravitic propulsion systems powered aircraft by most recently China and the East Coast, but throughout history, the U.S. China is poised to attack anywhere in the East Coast. I've been followed for over a week now from likely Homeland or FBI, and they are looking to move on me and are unlikely going to let me cross into Mexico, but won't because they know I am armed and I have a massive V-bid.
So we obviously don't know what to make of this, whether any of this is true. The sheriff at the press conference today did say that they were aware of this email and that they had also been looking into it, but didn't really go much farther than that. Phil, what do you make of it?
This is pretty basic. We used to have threat briefings every morning in the FBI director's office. I probably sat in on maybe, I'm going to guess, 2,000 threat briefings. We would have said this is an EDP, that is an emotionally disturbed person. Most of the threat briefings I saw, you could deal with an individual or individuals who had a clear target. That is the United States, that targeting had a political purpose, how to send a message to the U.S. government by blowing up a building, an embassy. So they could articulate the purpose, and the purpose was clear in their messages and their conversations with their co-conspirators. This is a fundamentally different case. If you read that email, and I have, assuming that it's correct, that email is not coherent. Some of what you heard from other people, including the girlfriend, is not coherent. So I think you're not clearly looking at a case of terror. Unlike New Orleans, you're looking at someone who's emotionally disturbed. EDP, emotionally disturbed person. We saw this all the time.
Yeah, and they've been careful not to actually call it an act of terror at this point, just basically saying that they're still investigating. Bobby, it's interesting. Obviously the FBI is going through all his phones, and the sheriff made the point today that they've only really scratched the surface with the phones and the laptops. But with the Tesla Cybertruck, these Teslas are so advanced now that Elon Musk apparently has been able to digitally go into the Tesla and review all of the information. It's almost like it has its own black box where they can see exactly what the Tesla was doing. There's video, there's all sorts of analytics, which I'm just thinking back to all the investigations you've done, Bobby. This is sort of a new component.
Yeah, and when this first happened and the sheriff first said Elon gave them all this help, I used to have to subpoena things for, to get that kind of information. Now Elon Musk is like giving it to them day one. And I'm really excited about this because the electronic information that you get, it would have taken us weeks, if not months in my day to put a timeline together like that. We would have been reviewing gas station videos and convenience store videos and the like that we've all seen in the past. Now you get this almost real-time timeline and movements. It's very valuable. It's incredible to put that together. And, I wish I had that kind of assistance, back in the day when I was doing investigations in the 80s and 90s. And I think that Elon Musk is one of these guys who's, going to give that kind of assistance. And these vehicles themselves have such great tracking abilities and things like that I was amazed at what they were able to put together so quickly.
And I don't know if both of you were able to watch the press conference today in Las Vegas. There was also one yesterday. And we'll get to New Orleans in a minute. New Orleans, the press conferences have been a little bit of a mess. Vegas, I found them to be very clear with the sheriff there. And he actually addressed, there's been all these conspiracy theories that have popped up since both of these incidences, especially the one in Vegas. People were wondering why the passport wasn't burned in the car after the explosion. And it was interesting today, Phil, the sheriff really went through one by one and tried to clear some of these things up, even explained where the passport was in the car, explained the way it all went down, which seemed helpful, I think, because people were kind of going on these wild goose chases with what happened, Phil.
Yeah, I find this interesting. Typically back in the day, you would say, be careful about releasing too many facts until you can sort of move down the road on the case and until you can present a picture. But with the speed of the internet, and one of the big surprises to me about American culture in the past 15 years, the willingness of people to accept conspiracies, you're getting law enforcement, in this case, getting way out in front on addressing facts before they spin out too quickly on the internet. I think to deal with conspiracies that simply wouldn't have gone around 20 years ago. In contrast, as you say, we'll get to a moment to New Orleans where they talked a little bit ahead of the game about what they did not know. That is whether this was a group effort or not. That was a bit of a different case.
Yeah, so with New Orleans, one of the most interesting things that just came out within the last couple of hours is we're learning that the compound that was used in the explosives, in the IEDs that the suspect here, Jabbar, used, they've been testing it, and apparently this is a compound that is very rare and that has never been used in an American terrorist attack before, which seems somewhat alarming. I mean, have you ever heard of anything like this, Bobby?
No, but it's not as alarming to me as an investigator because these guys have access to blow things up, and it's actually an assistance to an investigator. The more rare something is, the more specific it is, the more you have ability to find it because you have to wade through a bunch of stuff. If he's using common stuff, it's more difficult to track because it's everywhere. The more specific stuff like this, it's a signature or somebody else taught him how to use this. It's a very singular or specific avenue of investigation to pursue. And in a way, the fact that he used this very rare compound or combination of compounds is actually a help, I think, to the investigation.
Yeah, Phil, explain how that could help. I mean, can they go back and look at this compound and then figure out where he may have learned to use it and build the bombs from?
Oh, heck yeah. Bobby is dead on. If this is coming into the morning briefing room I mentioned earlier in the FBI director's office, this is an investigative opportunity. Let me give you a bunch of leads. Number one, Google searches. Did this individual search download videos that showed him how to make this explosive? Is there residue in his residence or someplace else of this explosive? Does that residue have other people? Does that area have other people's fingerprints, which might suggest that somebody helped him? Where did the other materials, the hardware to make the explosive come from? This, because it's so unique, offers a bunch of avenues for analysts and investigators. And I'm dead on with Bobby. I think this is a great opportunity for investigators to determine whether there are other avenues they have to pursue, like co-conspirators.
Yeah, I mean, this seems significant. We also found out today that here in New Orleans, he was staying at an Airbnb. The Airbnb was on fire when I got here to sort of start reporting, and no one explained what the fire was. Today, they've explained that he tried to set fire to the Airbnb here in New Orleans to sort of burn the place down, and apparently it didn't work. It went out by itself, and they were able to find bomb-making materials and actually a silencer to a rifle also in the Airbnb. So that's also something that's just came out really in the last half an hour. I want to ask you about something else that I found really strange with this case. Jabbar, the suspect here in New Orleans, he was living in Houston. That's where he came from. They raided the Houston. You guys have seen this. They raided his Houston apartment where he was living, FBI yesterday, and then left. And there was a reporter that was able to get inside the apartment in Houston and do a whole video in the apartment and show what the FBI had done there. Even showed the list of what the FBI took, showed everything that was left behind. And people were sort of outraged, like, how did this reporter get in when the FBI just left? And then the FBI came back today and went back into the apartment after the reporter was there. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this, Bobby?
No, and quite frankly, I'm a little bit embarrassed by it because I've done hundreds of search warrants. I worked drug gangs in the 80s and 90s in New York City. We were kicking in doors and ramming doors 2 or 3 times a week. When you go in, you execute a search warrant, you're methodical, you take photos of everything, you carefully search the place, you obtain the evidence, you bag it, tag it, take it out of there. And then when you leave, when we used to kick in doors, if we knocked a door out, we would wait for the superintendent or the landlord or the owner of the property to come back. We'd make sure that that property was secured before we left. If somebody went in there and hurt themselves after we left because we left that door ajar, as you saw in that video, I mean, that could come back and the FBI could be liable for something like that. So we always made sure that the premises we searched was as secure as we could, or as secure as it was when we got there, if we could do that. And that meant sometimes leaving agents behind until a superintendent or landlord could get somebody there to repair the door and make sure that that premises was secured when we left. We always had to leave, what you saw in that video, a copy of the search warrant and a copy of the inventory of things that we took out. And we always had to leave that in an obvious place, and that's why it was placed on the countertop there, as you saw in the video. But the fact that that door was left ajar like that, That's very, very poor methods and procedures. That's not how it should be done.
Yeah, and I would imagine the landlord maybe later let the reporter in. And I was thinking to myself, well, I guess if the FBI did everything they need to do, obviously if the landlord let me in, I'd go in too and take a video. But then when the FBI went back today and started going through things again, and you know that the reporter's already been there, I mean, we only have about a minute left, but I mean, Phil, were you surprised?
I was. I mean, there's a difference in questions between whether the reporter's presence there might have somehow inhibited the case. I doubt it. My experience transitioning to the FBI, one of the things I saw in the FBI is those crime scene guys are really, really good. So that first take they had in the apartment, I suspect, got them what they needed. That said, again, I'm with Bobby. I looked at this and said, there's something missing here, something missing with the landlord, something missing with the reporter, because I don't think this will affect the case. But it looks kind of embarrassing. And if you're going to look at this case from the outside, from an FBI investigator's perspective, you got to ask, what does a reporter do in the apartment? I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so rare to see something like that. It kind of blew my mind. Phil Mudd, Bobby Chacon, appreciate you both coming on tonight. It's nice to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Okay, still ahead tonight. It was a rocky day in Congress, but Speaker Mike Johnson came out victorious. But not all Republicans are happy about this. Coming up next, two Republicans with two very different takes. That's after this.
For a thriving economy and a rebuilt middle class and strong borders and a strong military, and we can deliver that. See, these objectives and these aims don't have an R or a D behind them. They have a USA. That's what we're about.
All right, that was newly reelected House Speaker Mike Johnson trying to bring unity to a divided Congress. Johnson almost lost his first bid today after 9 Republicans refused to vote for him. And it's reported that Trump was actually forced to intervene and call 2 of the holdouts, who then changed their votes for Johnson, allowing him to narrowly take the win. Johnson was supposed to be a shoo-in for Republicans. So what does this actually mean, that he came so very close to losing because of members of his own party? I want to bring in Montana Republican Congressman Ryan Zinke, who had no problem voting for Johnson. Congressman, it's nice to see you tonight. Thank you for joining us. I mean, this was supposed to be an easy vote. Typically, it's a very, very easy vote. What do you think it means that there were some holdouts? Do you think it means that Trump may have some issues getting his agenda through? Do you think it means that Mike Johnson might have some issues in the future?
Well, first I want to emphasize this was a good day in the House of Representatives that obviously has had some past history of not getting things done in chaos. So 2 things happened. We elected a speaker in the first round, and secondly, the rules package passed. As you point out, and I've emphasized with my colleagues, the reason why we have the majority at all in the House of Representatives is Donald J. Trump was in the top of the ticket. And to prolong leadership and to cause chaos only would prevent us from getting that agenda done that we promised everyone in the beginning. A promise made should be a promise kept. I'm glad the holdouts came to Jesus, if that's the right term in a moment, after talking to President Trump and realized the error in their ways. But continuing chaos in the Congress simply will result in not getting the job that we were sent to Washington to do.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it happened, I think, faster than, I mean, you watch some of the other cable networks, they made it sound like this was going to go on for days and this was going to be a massive, problem. And it still happened somewhat quickly. I mean, Trump had to make a couple of calls, but it got done. Right now it's 219 to 215, so it's a slim majority, which you sort of alluded to. Could get even slimmer. I mean, do you think there's going to be issues? Trump talks about this big agenda, wanting to get a lot done. Do you think he's going to have issues getting some of the big things through? Is this sort of like a little bit of a preview of what we might see?
Well, I think we're going to focus now, since we have a leader, of securing the border. That's job one. Secondly, we have the debt ceiling coming up. Third, we have the Trump taxes to make sure that those are extended. And then we have, of course, the economy. Nothing works unless the economy works. And on both the Republicans and the Democrats today, both Speaker Johnson and Joaquin brought up that, look, it's about the American public and making sure that the people have a chance to be successful here. That means creating an opportunity. Economy matters. And we should, as Congress, we should in place the policies that promote an economy and promote a vibrant chance to obtain the American dream. So I'm positive, but, always with a tight vote, we got to make sure that we align ourselves to what's important. We have to make sure that our fiscal house is in order. That's make sure we have the rules in place. We can follow procedure so we don't get in this chaos every time. But overall, I think there's a huge win for the House, considering how difficult it was in the 118th to get things done. In the first round, this is a big, big win. And I think I'm hopeful it's a prelude to what's going to occur with the Trump agenda actually getting done.
Yeah, we'll see. Congressman Ryan Zinke, appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you so much, sir. I hope you have a good weekend.
You as well, and God bless.
Okay, now I want to bring in a former Republican member of Congress who says he never would have voted for Johnson. So the opposite opinion, former chairman of the Freedom Caucus and former Virginia Congressman Bob Good is joining us tonight. Congressman Good, thank you for being with us. I mean, you are obviously not a fan of Mike Johnson. He's got a record of being pretty conservative. What's your main issue with him?
Well, it's not an issue with him, and it wouldn't be accurate to say I'm not a fan of him. I'm not a fan of what he has done as Speaker over the past 14 months. You mentioned he's got a record. That's exactly right. This is a policy difference. It's a procedure difference. Under Mike Johnson, we passed 7 major spending bills, 5 CRs, and 2 buses, many buses or omnibuses, whatever you want to call them, all of which averaged over 200 Democrat votes, predominantly passed by Democrats. Speaker Johnson said he would not do that, and he did it repeatedly 7 times in 14 months. He passed $300 billion in new spending just since the election. The $200 billion in mandatory spending for what the so-called Social Security Fairness Act, which is a terrible bill, and $100 billion so-called disaster relief. So to give Biden's FEMA, which has been weaponized and politicized against citizens if they have a Trump sign in their yard, to give them $100 billion going out the door, wouldn't allow us to have pay-for amendments to try to offset the new spending. He voted to reauthorize FISA twice without a warrant amendment, something that he stood against when he was on the Judiciary Committee for 7 years. He held a vote to kick out George Santos, where 206 Democrats voted to kick out a Republican member who'd never been convicted of a crime. Repeatedly, he failed us. He didn't lead. And so we don't need more of the same this new Congress. However, this took place because of President Trump. We had the compression on the calendar of January 6th and January 20, which made it very different than 2 years ago. And now it'll be up to Republicans to deliver. We've got the Senate, we've got the House, narrow margins, admittedly, but that's what the Democrats had 4 years ago. And they delivered on their radical agenda when they had full control in the first 2 years of Biden's administration. So we have that same opportunity as Republicans, and we need to deliver for the American people in a positive way, not in a negative way the Democrats did.
So who's you're talking about Trump now. Who's the real speaker? I mean, is it Trump or is it Johnson?
Well, Johnson clearly would not be Speaker if it weren't President Trump's support. That was the difference. Johnson has very weak support among the membership. It was only because of, again, the calendar with January 6th being Monday, January 22 weeks from now. No Republican wants to mess that up or to interfere with that. And President Trump obviously does not want that interfered with. But it'll be up to Speaker Johnson to be Speaker of the House. President Trump can't be President and Speaker of the House. He'll be, I believe he's the best president of my lifetime in his first term. I think he'll be a very effective president again, but he needs a strong speaker who can lead, do something that Speaker Johnson did not do for the previous 14 months. Let's hope he rises to the occasion this time.
Do you think Trump actually likes Johnson, or do you think, like you're saying, he was just up against the clock and there's these deadlines, so he was kind of forced into this?
Well, I wouldn't presume to know whether or not he does or doesn't like Speaker Johnson. Speaker Johnson's a very likable guy. I enjoyed serving with him my first 3 years when he was the conference vice chair. I think he comes from conservative worldview. However, it doesn't matter what you believe if you're not willing to fight for what you believe. And Republican priorities have to be more than campaign talking points. We continued to fund the Biden-Pelosi Schumer agenda over the last 2 years when we had full control of the House. We refused to cut off funding for Mayorkas, for Attorney General Garland. We continue to give them the money to weaponize the government against conservatives. We continue to fund the climate extremism, the transgender extremism, abortion funding, all DEI, CRT policies we ran against. We refused to stop funding those. Well, now we have full control of government. It's time for us to make real spending cuts and changes in Washington.
So, I mean, Speaker Johnson got through today. He had a victory. But do you think he could get ousted, like, in the future? I mean, how long do you think this is going to last?
Well, hopefully he will be successful, and hopefully he will do what he says he's going to do, what the American people elected Republicans to do when they gave Republicans full control of the government. However, if he were to fail to do that, if he were to resort back to the failures of the past, he didn't cast a conservative vision. He didn't pressure moderates to get on board and to do the things that we ran on, the things that we promised the American people 2 years ago when they gave us the House. He needs to do that now as the Speaker. That's what President Trump wants. That's what the Senate majority wants. If he fails to do that, then yes, I would say his speakership would be in jeopardy.
We'll see what happens here. I mean, it was close today. You can see the map right there, 215 to 219. Bob Good, we appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Okay, coming up next, the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni controversy started out as more of a Hollywood gossip story than anything else, but has now turned into a story that we all need to be paying attention to. Baldoni is now suing the New York Times, one of the most reputable publications in the world, for $250 million, claiming they defamed him and could have ruined his career. So if you were Team Lively in all this, you may want to think again, and we're going to explain why. The details are next. So the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni controversy started out as an inside Hollywood drama, with many believing Lively had been done dirty by her It Ends With Us co-star and director Baldoni. Lively filed a legal complaint accusing Baldoni of sexual harassment on set, as well as coordinated smear campaigns to destroy her reputation during the film's release. This was back in August. Now, Lively's complaint was expounded upon in a lengthy New York Times article titled "We Can Bury Anyone: Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine." This article pointed to text messages that appear to show Baldoni and his publicist plotting a manipulative takedown of Lively in the press and also on social media. But then there was a real bombshell, which changed pretty much everything. This week, Baldoni and his team filed a $250 million defamation suit. And it's not against Lively, but it's against the New York Times. They say that the New York Times took private text messages out of context to serve the narrative of Lively, an A-list celebrity. Here's what Baldoni's lawyer told NBC News when asked about the many claims Lively has made against him.
Was there a coordinated smear campaign to bring down Blake Lively?
100% no. Justin Baldoni from the get-go said, I don't want to do anything negative toward her. I don't want to hurt her.
Do you plan to sue Blake Lively?
Absolutely.
You will?
Yes. I am more than willing to take every single text message that exists out there, lay them out, put them on a website for the world to see, have them see the truth and determine the truth for themselves.
So the lawsuit accuses the Times of printing the story before receiving comment from Baldoni, omitting text exchanges that paint Baldoni in a positive light, and cherry-picking portions of exchanges that actually defame Baldoni. His team is now seeking a jury trial against the New York Times. Joining me now, Ken Turkel, who represented both Hulk Hogan and Sarah Palin in their defamation suits. The latter was against the New York Times. And also Elaine Bredehoft, who was Amber Heard's trial attorney against Johnny Depp. So very curious what you both have to say about this. Elaine, I want to start with you. Baldoni's lawsuit says the New York Times, quote, central thesis encapsulated in a defamatory headline designed to immediately mislead the reader. And I want to show you the headline. It says, we can bury anyone inside a Hollywood smear machine. So they called it a smear machine. Why do you think this is fair?
Well, let me just tell you, Baldoni's suit is 85 pages of whining and filled with inaccuracies. First, it attacks the New York Times article claiming the reporters accepted as true Blake Lively's narrative. But if you read the article, the vast majority of the article is based on text messages and emails of Baldoni and his PR team. Also, Baldoni was given 14 hours to respond, plenty of time to deny and provide the evidence that existed. The same is true for the complaint. You just heard Baldoni's attorney say, oh, you should read all the text. Well, he should have incorporated them into the complaint, because what he's got in there now is not very impressive, and it's it's basically irrelevant and a lot of whining. Second, and very importantly in this case, Baldoni and his PR team brought the suit in California, even though the New York Times is in New York, and Blake Lively brought her suit in New York. But this is going to come back to haunt him and bite him, because California sports one of the strongest anti-SLAPP laws, strategic lawsuit against public participation in the country. When someone brings a retaliatory suit against the exercise of free speech on a subject which is in the public interest or a matter of public concern, the suit can be dismissed up front by the court upon motion brought by the defendants. The New York Times article speaks against those being accused of sexual harassment or domestic violence using PR teams to target and falsely smear the victims in retaliation. Sounds like a matter of public concern to me. And remember, Depp brought his suit against Amber Heard in Virginia, far away from any witnesses or litigants, because Virginia has terrible anti-SLAPP laws and California's are so strong. Third, and I think this is important, the complaint claims the text messages are out of context. It gives one example where the PR team is bragging because someone else caught the bug from them and attacked Blake Lively online. How do you claim the text message, quote, he wants to feel like she can be buried, end of quote, is out of context? How do you claim the text message, quote, we know we can bury...
Well, yeah, Elaine, this is the text message. I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to explain. Let's put the text message back up so people can see what you're talking about. This is a text exchange between the publicity team where it says, you really outdid yourself with this piece, and there is a piece called Could Blake Lively Be Canceled? But the emoji, the upside down emoji, Baldoni is saying that wasn't included in the New York Times article. And it should have been, because Baldoni's legal team is saying that shows that this whole thing was a joke. I mean, what do you make of it, Ken?
No, my point is that was one example, and they were all thrilled because somebody else went online and attacked Blake Lively after they made their targeted point. But what I was just saying is, I'm quoting to you what the other text messages said. He wants to feel like she can be buried. We know we can bury anyone. You can't put this in writing because that would get us in lots of trouble. All of this will importantly be untraceable. These are all these text messages.
Ken, what do you think? I mean, should they have included the emoji, Ken? Is it unfair?
It's not. I wouldn't look at it in a vacuum. And I think that as much as like the text messages are nothing you ever want to see. We see this a lot with Slack, with internal messaging where they, they're just talking freely about it. The fact that they say we could bury anyone or whatever, it doesn't really matter. What matters is whether they published something that was false or they published it with knowledge that falsely reckless disregard. What I find interesting is Brian Freeman went to great lengths. It's not just one text. He embedded, we call that embedding, in the complaint. It's a practice that's become more and more popular with internet speech where you're taking text or tweets or whatever, embedding them and commenting. Then he does this laborious analysis of how they're incomplete or omissive. Now, you can have defamation in a number of different ways. You can have it through implication, where maybe in a vacuum, sentence 1 is true, sentence 2 is true, standing alone, sentence 3 is true, standing alone. But when you put them together to imply something different that's false, then you can have a defamation by implication. You can have a direct falsity where they just say something false. And you can have contextual defamation where the overall context of the statements omits the overall the totality of what they publish omits the context, right? And Brian Friedman's point, and I think it's a fairly good point in this case, is that they cherry pick things for the complaint that was filed over in New York, which is a Title VII complaint, like employment law type, labor and employment law complaint with a breach of contract in there on the loan out agreement. What I find fascinating is, number one, the degree to which they went to analyze these texts and show the lack of context, or the leaps that were made to imply truths that don't exist, right? And I think that's always a solid ground to have. The other thing that I think is amazing, and it's really an interesting practice, there's this big discussion about the New York Times providing them an email and a chance to comment. And Brian, that happens often now. I would have told you 5 years ago, I never engaged in that. I didn't do that. I would be like, forget it, they're going to publish. But as time has gone on, really, and maybe more than 5, even maybe 7, but we engage. If I get a case pre-publication now, and they send me, here's what we're going to do. Here's the hit piece. Here are the topics. Would you like to comment? I avail myself of that now in a very non-combative way, frankly, because the goal should be for all of us to find truth. Now, what I find interesting here was he sued them, saying that they breached their contract to wait until noon and publish before noon. My personal practice, and Brian Friedman may do it differently, the minute I get that pre-publication email, they've been working on something for days, if not weeks, if not months. I immediately ask for an extension. And I tell them, give me a week. I can't digest this. I just get out of court, whatever. And let me give you answers that will help you publish something that's true. I don't want to sue you. It's a loss if I have to sue you. Let's get the truth there. Maybe it dilutes some of the acute nature of what they're saying. Maybe it gets them to pull topics out. I've had that happen, more and more successful every day. And a good reporter should engage in that. We should collaborate. And I'll look at them and say, I understand you're doing your job and you're going to try and put in there what you want, but listen before you do it so I don't sue you on something you could have prevented. If they say no and they don't give me time, my setup at that point for reckless disregard or actual malice on cross-examination is amazing now. I'll say, you didn't want the truth. I offered. I couldn't do this in 14 hours. I'm done.
And that's a good. I think that's a good strategy you have. That's a good strategy you have, Ken, asking for extension, because you're right. Some reporters, and it's not right, but they've already got their whole story ready to go, and then at the last second they ask for a comment. And what's interesting here is they're saying the New York Times reached out to Baldoni at 10 p.m., told him that he had until 12 the next day, but then published at 10, 11 a.m. So basically 2 hours early, and didn't give him those extra 2 hours to come up with a response. We only
for Brian to make for Baldoni. I think it's a fair point. But what I would tell you is this, right? They've been working on this forever. I've had that email come to me with the date turnaround and 150 bullet points on it. And I'm like, pound sand. You want to publish against that background, take your chance. All right, that's it. I'm good.
Responded.
Yeah. Well, Baldoni's lawyer is going to join Chris. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. What did you say, Elaine? What was the last thing you said?
I said he responded. He denied it. He didn't say, oh, and I'm going to give you some more stuff in another hour, so go ahead and wait till noon. He had already responded to him. So they already had his response.
If you said, why not wait the extra 2 hours? If you said noon, though. Well, anyway, Baldoni's lawyer is going to join Chris on Monday, so he'll.
Well, I'll tell you this.
Baldoni's lawyer is going to join Chris on Monday, so we'll hear more from him.
But at one point, they were probably up all night
was. That's a good point.
A more substantive response, you know? I've done that. I've done that drill before, man.
Yeah, it's possible.
There's a couple
Ken
of points
Turkel, Elaine Bredehoff, sorry, we're out of time. Let me give you 30 more seconds, Elaine, then we got to go because we're out of time. Go ahead, though.
The biggest question is motive here. You know, Blake Lively has absolutely no motive to complain about sexual harassment. No motive whatsoever. She wants that movie to succeed. So why would she put herself out there with the complaints of sexual harassment unless they're true? And then you think about Baldoni's justification for asking about her weight. There isn't a doctor in the universe who's going to say, oh, you have a back problem? Well, you can lift 110 pounds, but you can't lift 120. So you better find out how much she weighs.
Yeah.
They would replace or use a body double. This is just ludicrous what he's coming back with.
All right.
deny the text.
Well, there'll be more. Like I said, we'll have more Monday. Baldoni's Lord, we're out of time. Thank you both for coming on, though. Ken, Elaine, I hope you both have a good weekend. Appreciate you both.
You too, Brian.
Okay.
Thanks for
Coming up
having me.
next, could dry January actually be keeping you? You got it. It's nice to see you guys. Could dry January actually be keeping you from getting cancer? It actually could. That story's next. U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued a shocking new warning linking even moderate alcohol consumption to 7 different kinds of cancers: breast, liver, colorectal, mouth, throat, larynx, and esophageal cancer. Now, the report says alcohol directly contributes to 100,000 cancer cases and 20,000 cancer deaths each year. Alcohol is now the 3rd leading preventable cause of cancer behind tobacco and obesity. Pretty shocking. Joining us now is oncologist Dr. Nitesh Paryani. Dr. Paryani, we appreciate you being with us tonight. I don't think people realized linked to 7 cancers. Tell us what we need to know about this new study.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Brian. So, I think this is something, it's interesting. I think is in the medical profession, we've known for some time now that, the risk of alcohol and cancer is really quite high. And so I think it's good that it's coming to the public discourse and we're talking about warning labels so that people can make informed choices. We're saying that this is the 3rd preventable cause of cancer. And, we're talking about 20,000 deaths a year, as you pointed out. That's a lot. When we compare it to even traffic fatalities from alcohol, that runs at about 13,000 deaths a year. And we think about how much time, money, and effort we spend educating the population on that. I think it's good that we're starting to have a conversation about this preventable cause, especially as we see, an increase in incidence in young folks who are being diagnosed with cancer. We used to think that 1 to 2 drinks a day was a reasonable amount, but the more we've learned is, unfortunately, that may not be the case. And I think this discussion to have warning labels, and really, I think it's about education. We're not saying that you can't drink or you should completely avoid it, but you should understand the risks that we're getting into.
And just real quick, if you don't drink during the week and then you just have some drinks on the weekend, is that okay? If you're not drinking most of the time?
Unfortunately, we have to say at the end of the day, there's really no safe level of consumption. We know that alcohol is a poison, right? No matter how much we consume or how infrequently we do it, there's no safe dose anymore that we can really prescribe as physicians. But again, that being said, something's better than nothing, right? As we talk about approaching dry January and reducing consumption during this month, maybe that's a good idea. Certainly it's better than drinking every day. And I think, at the end of the day, it's really about moderation and trying to moderate intake as much as possible.
Yeah, I only have 10 seconds left. It's kind of weird we're having this conversation when I'm in New Orleans. But, is this all alcohol? Is it hard alcohol? Because you used to hear, red wine was okay. I'm kind of hoping, is something okay?
Yeah, I know. I was really excited about today to be the bearer of bad news and, not have anything exciting, especially as you're sitting there on Bourbon Street. But no, we can't say, there are some cardiac benefits to red wine, but unfortunately those benefits are outweighed by risk. I'm not on here telling people don't drink. I don't think that's a reasonable piece of advice, but I think it's to have a conscientious understanding of the risks and moderating as much as possible.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, Doctor. Have a good weekend. We'll be right back after this.